Welcome, everyone. My name is Tichaba Mutsielwa. I'm from the Speakers Firm. Welcome and thank you for choosing to join the Empower Entrepreneurs Digital Conversations, a COVID-19 discussion hosted by EmpowerWorks. A very special welcome to our keynote speaker, Mr. Kganki Matabane, CEO of Black Business Council. We have a broad representation of stakeholders joining us directly via Zoom, and they will post their questions on the chat box. At the end of the keynote, there will be a Q&A, and we will try to answer and respond to as many of the questions as possible. To get a direct invite to the talks, please send your details to the WhatsApp number 082-088-5262 or visit the EmpowerWorks website, www.empowerworks.co.za, where you can also get information around empowerment, empower women, empower youth, speakers firm, leadership summits, and other events. We are live on the following EmpowerWorks digital platforms: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, as well as YouTube. The hashtag that we've been following all this time is hashtag Empower Entrepreneurs. COVID-19 has changed the world. Many business people are looking to bodies that have got a voice to advance their plight, especially when we know that many entrepreneurs don't have platforms where they can be heard. What has kept you up at night at Black Business Council? Over to you, Mr. Kganki Matabane, CEO, Black Business Council. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Chava and Simpiwe from PowerWorks. Evening to everyone, and thank you very much for choosing to spend your Friday evening with us. I'm sure you'll have chosen to go somewhere else. Maybe unfortunately that we're on level 4, and this is the last Friday of level 4. You like to come and at least learn from some of us, and then let's raise issues that then can build the country. But thank you very much for being here. You could have chosen to be anywhere else. I think there are very few issues that I wanted to raise. The first thing is that the world has indeed changed. We are now in the new normal. And I suspect this new normal is never going to change. We're not going to go back to where we were. We're not going to be able to do certain things that we used to do. And I think that should at least give us teach us a lesson and make us a bit agile as people. So the biggest challenge I think that has happened under COVID-19 is a lot of small businesses may not be able to open their doors when we get to level 0. Most of them are suffering as well now. There are going to be a lot of people who are going to lose their jobs. There's going to be a lot of unemployment. But from the Black Business Council, we also realized that there were other people who are trying to utilize the opportunity to reverse economic transformation. There were people who wanted to change rules, especially to ignore economic transformation legislation, BB Act, Triple PFA and PFMA and so on, in the name of COVID. And we fought for that. As you may have seen when we were supporting the Minister of Tourism and the Minister of Small Business. There are other lessons that I think we have to learn. We have been having a challenge and a crisis that we cannot supply basic medical PPEs, basic medical equipment, medical and other medical consumables that the country needs, because we're depending mainly on China and India. So when China and India closed their borders, that created a crisis for South Africa. So that is a big lesson. But there have been other positive lessons. For example, one of the big lessons is that there's been a serious cooperation between business, government, civil society, and everyone involved. Decision-making by government has been extremely, extremely impressive. And then one wonders what stops the very same government from doing things the same way as they were doing now? The decision making was actually much was done in a much efficient and effective way. There was speed in implementation of policies. There was no perpetual consultation that we usually see, where some issues that can be resolved in 1 week, they end up being resolved in a year. So there was a visibility of leadership. There's still a visibility of leadership, as you've seen. The president addresses us now and then when they want to announce important things. And the situation also exposed sometimes lack of proper coordination. As you've seen, some of the ministers will come and actually contradict what is in the regulations. So we need to then learn from those and say, why can't we use the very same collaboration and enthusiasm to then do things that are supposed to be done and stop, reduce crime, reduce the unemployment, deliver services, and other important issues that we should be doing. A lot of rural areas, informal settlements, have not actually received water before. They're only receiving water now because they have to wash their hands. So why can't we have water continuously? The people who are homeless have been provided with the temporary homes and meals. Why can't we do that on a daily basis? Like now, next week, the schools are reopening. All the schools are going to be provided with water. Why do we wait for a crisis to then provide those services? So for me, I think the issues that need to be addressed are those. Why can't we ensure that we utilize the empowerment legislation to on a daily basis to actually empower and transform the country instead of ticking the boxes like we've done before, where you see a company that says it's a level 1, but when you look at the company, it doesn't look like a level 1. So those are some of the issues. Why can't we deal with the access to funding? For example, we've seen there's a 200 billion loan guarantee scheme that has been announced by National Treasury. But when you look at the scheme, it's got a lot of flaws, because I'll give you an example. A small business will do business with government. They don't get paid. Then they get blacklisted by banks. And then the very same government comes and introduces a loan guarantee scheme that says, one of the criteria says it will only be given to people who qualify in the bank. So it will be given only to people who are not blacklisted. But the blacklisting was caused by the same government that pays people late or don't pay people at all. So it becomes a vicious cycle for small businesses. So we need to then find a way to say, when we introduce intervention schemes like those ones, have we consulted enough and consulted the people who are going to be affected by the scheme? And for example, if you say the scheme must only be administered by the banks, by the big 4 or 5 banks, what then happens to development financial institutes like IDC and others? Why can't you give the money to them to also administer? Because at least some of them, they've got a better understanding of the struggles of small businesses. So I think before we take questions, for me, we need to utilize the COVID-19 pandemic crisis to devise a new economy, a new economy where the majority of the people are owning the economy. The economy where there's access to markets, where we stop ticking boxes, but we implement the spirit of transformation. So I think those are just a few words that I wanted to give. I think maybe during interaction, one can go to more other issues and go deeper to other issues.
Thank you very much for those opening words. There are already questions, but I'll use my privilege to ask the first ones. I find it interesting, the comment that you made that some people were trying to delay the transformation agenda under the cover of COVID, possibly using other excuses like what do we prioritize, life in terms of getting things in or not. So in the same vein, can you perhaps give us some reasons that were put forward as to why they wanted to bypass transformation and what was already in place?
Yeah, thank you very much. That the first one, people were saying this is a crisis. So in an emergency, in a crisis, we almost suspend all the laws. And our argument was that just like the Constitution is not suspended, the economic transformation legislations are not suspended. So they have to be implemented. I think people were just trying to find ways where they continue to exclude us and exclude the majority. And obviously they'll have to try and come with the excuses. And when we ask questions, for example, when we ask questions, people then come and say, we have appointed certain service providers because we utilized certain laws. But when we ask them, which laws did you use? Then they start to come with criteria that are on their own, then excluding Black people. But what this basically calls for us is that all of us must always be vigilant at all times to ensure that we don't have some people who are against economic transformation trying to find ways of sidestepping it.
Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'll switch off my video so that I can get close to the questions. There are quite many. So bear with me as I switch off my video to get close to the questions. The first question comes from Nkulele. Thank you, Mr. Kganki and Sechaba. What is required to be accepted as a member of BVC? I've sent an email about membership to info@blackbusinesscouncil.africa, but no response. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nkulele. I'll follow up on that one. And then I'll check what has happened. But that's the correct email address. When people request to join, we usually send them the forms, and they look at the forms and complete them and send them back. But maybe let me just explain what the BBC is, I think, at the beginning, so that we don't have some confusion. So the BBC is a confederation of Black business associations and organizations. To make it easier to understand, we are like COSATU. So in COSATU, you've got the teachers union, the nurses union, and so on. So in BBC, you've got various professional organizations where you'll have the Black engineers, the Black accountants, people in ICT, people in health, and so on. So those become members of the BBC. So we don't accept an individual as a member. An individual has to go and join one of the associations to become a member, or you join as a company. So we do also have membership where people then come and join. And our main objective is to lobby on policy to ensure that policies in the country that are implemented or that are passed bring the Black people in the mainstream of the economy. So we do a lot of lobbying. For example, now there's an important piece of legislation that we're busy developing, that has been developed by the country, called the Public Procurement Bill. That seeks to, for people who are in business, I think those who are doing business with state will understand. We've got now what we call the triple PFA, which is a procurement legislation, which then controls and advises government on how they can do business with anyone. So anything that the SOCs and government are implementing are driven by that legislation, which is called a procurement triple PFA. And that legislation came into place in the year 2000. And we've been calling for that legislation to be done away with, because that is the legislation that is called what is called a 90-10 and 80-20 principle, where depending on the size of the transaction, 90% of the criteria that is used to award the tender is given on price and functionality, and then the 10% is given only to transformation. So we've been fighting for that legislation to change, and National Treasury, which is driving and controlling public procurement, has come up with what is called the Public Procurement Bill, which is an extremely important legislation. So we've been having some workshops on it, but it's important that all South Africans who've got interest in doing business with the state should look at that legislation, read it, critique it, and then submit comments. Those who've got comments, they can submit them to info@blackbusinesscouncil.africa, so that we can then enrich our submissions to ensure that the legislation prioritizes the utilization of the procurement by the entire government, including the organs of state like the SOCs, to transform the economy. So yeah, I'll look at your matter and then we'll revert back to you with the forms.
Yeah, thank you very much for that response. Anele says, Mr. Matabane, we are interested in the recently announced BBC and Ubank 1 billion loan funding. When should we expect the loan scheme to be operational? Our request is that the BBC and Ubank should make the requirements flexible for small-scale farmers who ordinarily do not have access to finance due to stringent requirements from the financial services sector.
Yeah, thank you, Anele, for the question. Most of our members, or most of small business and black business, they are struggling with two things. One, access to the markets. Secondly, access to funding. So the relationship that we have established with the Ubank is trying to address the latter, access to funding, because we've realized that most of the traditional financial institutions are not necessarily looking at the interest of small businesses. Most of our small businesses are not necessarily struggling with are not looking for billions of loans. They are looking at small amounts, relatively small amounts like 20,000, 500,000, 1 million, and so on. So the scheme that we came up with is going to try and address those. But you must also understand that Ubank is a bank. So because it's a bank, they've got regulations and rules that controls how it's operated. But we will try and make sure that it's as flexible as possible, because we're trying to resolve one question of access to funding by small businesses and black businesses. So as far as the scheme is concerned, we are busy finalizing the details as to how people are going to apply, where they're going to apply, and all those type of things. So we'll make an announcement by the 1st of August on how to access those funds that are made available by Ubank and our relationship.
Maybe so that we don't make assumptions, when you say black business, what do you mean?
Remember, we're in a constitutional democracy, so all these things are defined in law. So black business will mean business that is 51% owned by black people. Black people are also defined in law. It's Indian, coloreds, and Africans, and some Chinese. I know that part is controversial, but it's in law. That's how blacks are defined in our country.
Thank you for that. Portia is asking, do I have to be a member to participate in procurement opportunities with BBC? What opportunities do you have for small businesses?
Yeah, you don't necessarily have to be a member of the BBC, but I think it's important that we encourage people to join the BBC, because it's only when we've got the critical mass that we'll be able to be influential and be able to influence change and make a difference. Because when you're working alone, you are likely not to have much impact. But if you come and join hands with us, we will have more and much impact. Learn from others. I think learn from the minority organizations like Solidarity and AfriForum. They are so united that every time they are not happy with anything, they are able to come together and fund their own struggle. So it's important that we come to the BBC, strengthen it, so that as a united force, we can then be able to go and fight battles. So when we lobby, we lobby for the entire black business in the country. We lobby for black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, youth-owned businesses, businesses owned by people living with disabilities across the board, not necessarily members of the BBC. But by doing that, we are positive those people, once they are empowered, they'll be able to join the BBC. So if there are opportunities at BBC itself, everyone is welcome to compete for those opportunities. And what we also do, we now and then call businesses, because we've realized also that in addressing the access to markets, a lot of our members struggle to interact with big business. So we create platforms once a month where we call big businesses and we call small businesses to come and interact. To give example, if for example you are looking at trying to get business opportunities at a big organization like Investec or Discovery or Sasol or whoever, it may be difficult for you to go there alone. So we call their procurement people to come to the BBC and then come and share the opportunities that they have for black business. It's just now we have been disturbed by the COVID pandemic. We will have organized sessions already, and we think those type of sessions may only be effective if we do like face to face, unlike if we do virtual. But I think if there's going to be much delay in this, we may have to start having those sessions on a virtual basis. But we do call people to come and share opportunities that they have, and then from there, the small business and big business, they can then take the discussions forward on their own. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Class is asking, what is your position, the position of BBC with regard to the new Public Procurement Bill Act?
Yeah, I think Class, our position, for example, as far as the PPPFA, is very clear that the PPPFA has failed over the last 26 years to bring economic transformation in the country. It has perpetuated the old economic order where only the minorities are actually owning the economy. It has perpetuated the fact that SOCs, government and others, because they're using that as an act, they're not able to, at times, they're not able to extend the opportunities to black business, small businesses owned by people with disabilities and women. Because when you've got a set criteria that is there. And if you are working for an SOC, for example, you have to measure all the entities the same way. So if a company that says is level 1 comes and bids, you've got no legal leg to give that opportunity to someone else. You have to give it to that one who said they are level 1, even if you don't believe they are level 1. So in the public procurement bill that we're busy discussing, we want to ensure that we're able to set aside a certain procurement of government for Black business, women-owned businesses, businesses owned by people living with disabilities, and businesses owned by young people. So hence I'm calling upon all of us here to read the law, to read the bill and make contributions so that the final act, when it comes, it talks to our issues. For example, with the triple PFA, if you have an innovation now and you want to take that innovation to any government department, they can't do anything because the law says they must go out on tender. And if they go out on tender, there are two things that are likely to happen. You are likely to lose, but also someone else can steal your idea. So we need to then introduce innovation into the public procurement bill to say, how do we, as a country, how do we handle innovation? If someone brings an innovative idea and wants to solve a problem in government, how then do we handle that? So that is important. But again, it's important that all of us make our own submissions and come with ideas. For example, if young people feel there must be a 30% set aside for businesses owned by young people, this is an opportunity for you to make that noise and make submissions so that whoever at the end is going to consider the bill, and when they make it an act, they should at least see that and know that young people want a set aside. The same goes to women. Same goes to Black people in general. So that if there's a set aside, you want opportunities from organs of state, it becomes easier for you to motivate to say, but have you given a whatever percentage to this designated group or not? But also we need to ensure that that public procurement bill includes localization in it, because if we want to create the much needed jobs in the country, we really need to localize. We need to manufacture things here instead of depending on China and India in the main. Because if you do that way, you'll be able to create jobs here instead of exporting jobs.
Thank you very much. Let's bring it closer to the current context of COVID-19 lockdown. Martha says, good evening, Mr. Matabane. How can we practically position SMMEs to benefit from the supply and demand opportunities that the pandemic has presented? And what role can skills development play in this regard?
Yeah, thank you, Mafa. I'm not sure if the question is only limited to the current environment, because as I said, when the pandemic started, because this is unprecedented, it has never happened before, and people did not actually know what to do. So there have been instances where Black people were deliberately excluded from procurement opportunities, and we've raised those issues very sharply. But for me, it may be a bit late now to start to concentrate on the now. For me, what is important is to look at the future. Because if you concentrate on the now, you're going to find yourself in a situation that many people find themselves now. There are a lot of people who then, after realizing that there are opportunities to participate in the economy, they went and export things like masks and so on from other countries like China at high costs. But unfortunately, now that the demand because at that time the demand was higher than supply. But now that a lot of people then managed to buy masks, others managed to manufacture them in the country, the demand has gone down. So a lot of people are sitting with the stock that they don't know what to do with it. So for me, we rather focus on the future rather than focusing on the now. Let's ensure that we look at what are those items that are easy to manufacture in the short term, but in the medium and long term, what are the things that we can manufacture in the country instead of relying on import. And for me, I think that's where there are opportunities. And we've spoken to the Minister of Small Business. She agrees with us. Post this, they're going to make available funding mechanism where they will be able to support people who are starting factories in the country. And I think even with our EU bank arrangement, that's part of what we're thinking. To say, let's encourage small businesses to have real businesses, manufacture something, but also let's then work on a procurement mechanism like the public procurement bill to ensure that those people, as they manufacture, there's access to market. Because you don't want to find yourself manufacturing on one side, on one hand, but you cannot sell anything. You cannot sell to any person on the other side. So it's important that then we align the regulations and legislation in the country.
Thank you. I know you have defined what. I don't know why I've got that noise, but it's gone. I know you have defined what BBC does, but Semi Tamsanga Mafu wants to expand your mandate a little bit further. So bear with me. The question is, how can BBC embrace a broader pro-Black transformation beyond narrow commercial secretarianism? BBC doesn't pronounce itself when it comes to foot tracking by our cowardly ANC leaders, when it comes to implementing its very own Nasraq resolutions to return the land to the natives, to reconfigure the economy, to nationalize the SARB. Does BBC expect business sector to transform outside a broader social transformation? As I said, I know you do define what your mandate is, so feel comfortable to answer to the level that you represent.
Yeah, I think that I saw another question. It's just the question is moved, saying something about BBC and BMF in parallel. So, as I said, the BBC is a confederation, so the BMF is a member of the BBC. So, BBC is like a mother body of Black business in the country. So, I think it's important that you need to understand that Black Business Council is a council of business. We do concern ourselves with everything that is happening in the country, but we do have a focus on business. We understand the importance of land. We are very, very much interested because you can utilize land as a collateral. So land is part of business. Hence, we've been engaging with the minister, Minister Tokotisa, on that to speed up the process. But also, I think you need to understand that as a business organization, you have to choose how you want to fight, the battles. Do you want to be grabbing headlines on a daily basis, making news, or do you want to be influential, or you want both? So it's important, because if you keep on shouting on a daily basis, insulting people and making newspaper headlines for the wrong reasons, you may end up losing your ability to influence. Because remember, you are dealing with people. You are dealing with human beings. You are not dealing with machines. People get hurt, and then sometimes when they're hurt, they write you off. They don't want to listen to you. So we adopt various methodologies when we're dealing with different issues. Other issues will go to the public and raise them sharply. Others we we go and engage privately so that people can actually understand what we do and who we are.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to take a question that comes from our digital platforms from Nokukanya Shongwe. It says, how are you supporting, or where should new entrepreneurs go for funding?
Remember there's what we call the financial sector charter in the country that was passed, that actually compels financial institutions to fund small businesses, and that way they get points. That may not be enough, but that's one of the reasons. But I think you have to have an idea and take that idea and submit it to various financial institutions and see if you're able to secure funding. Because remember, we were in a capitalist environment where there will always be competition. So it does not necessarily mean that automatically you will be favored in any environment. Life is a battle we have to fight. So when we've got a new business, you need to look at various options. So there are financial institutions, but there are also wealthy individuals. If you approach wealthy individuals with your idea, if they like it, they can also back you. There are other developmental financial institutions like the National Empowerment Fund that also considers funding. They fund things like if you want to acquire a petrol station and all those type of things, they do fund. But I think the challenge there also has been that the National Empowerment Fund has not been sufficiently capitalized since inception. So we were also again been engaging with the Minister of Finance, the Minister of the DTI, where it reports to provide more funding for the National Empowerment Fund, because that is the only institution that was formed after 1994, specifically to assist black businesses and black women-owned businesses.
I like the fact that you add with black women-owned businesses, because there is a question that's quite specific to the opportunities that present now. So Portia is asking, how do we participate in the cleaning and sanitizing of schools? Those tenders are not advertised on National Treasury. When you contact the department, you don't get any reply. Quite practical.
I think as far as that is concerned, as far as I know, the tenders were advertised. They may have been given a short period to respond, but those tenders were advertised. So if people are not happy with those things, if there are specific issues that they want us to help, we can always help. But must be very, very specific to say, this is the evidence that this tender has not been advertised, and we engage with the National Treasury, DG and other people on a daily basis, so we can always raise those issues there if that is the case. So I see there's another question from Cynthia about the issue of a black bank. We feel it's very, very important. Of the view that it's very, very important that we have a black-owned and black-run bank, because if you look at the past 26 years, the current financial institutions have not necessarily prioritized black people. Mainly, I think some of them, if you look at their credit committees, you may not even find one black person. So they may not have the real experience of how a black business in a township or rural area or an informal settlement have challenges. So we saying we need to transform the current financial institutions but we must also have a black bank. If you look at the entire continent, there are so many banks that are owned by the people who are originally coming from those countries. If you go to Nigeria, there are so many banks. Kenya, Ghana, there are so many black-owned banks there. So what stops us from doing that? So they may even be, for example, they may be tiers of banks, because to start a normal bank, you need 250 million rand just to give to the Reserve Bank, not to start the bank, but it's a way of application. So by the time we are done with the application process, a lot of billions. So we need to look at changing the current legislation to maybe allow different tiers of banks, so that we don't only have the top or the big. So, but also just from a almost like a look and feel type of. It's important to have a bank that is black. In a country where the majority of people are black, it does not make sense not to have a bank that is owned by the majority.
Here is a email from Akashti. Dear Mr. Matabane, thank you for your time and support. As the CEO of BDC, are there opportunities for us to engage with your stakeholders regarding products we have that can be part of CSI initiatives?
Yeah, the opportunities are always there. So I think if you've got any specific thing that you need, I think you can send an email there on info@businesscouncil.africa, and we'll have a look at it and see if there's a possibility that we can then make you to be able to engage with the other people on the other side that we're looking for. So opportunities are always there, but be specific on what exactly you're looking for. Because I get a lot of emails where people are not specific. Like if someone sends us an email and say, "I want to be in business, please help me," chances are we may not even be able to respond to that email, because we don't know what the person needs. But if you are specific and say, I've got the computer company, I want to sell software, I want to do this, that is more specific. What can be able to then try and assist. But if you just come and say, "Oh, no, I want to be in business," it means you have not done your job, or you have not done your research. And unfortunately, you cannot expect another person to do a research on your behalf, because they will never know what you want. So it's up to you to then say, "This is what I want," look for information. When you approach people, ensure that you approach them with the information. Because otherwise, if you request a meeting, for example, with the CEO of a big company or a bank or anything, they give you the 15 minutes. If they think you are wasting their time, you'll never get another meeting. So it's important that you do your homework first as an individual before you put the blame on other people.
Thank you. Let me move on to say, maybe perhaps if you can read, because there was that echo that kept coming. Let me see the question that you can read. From Princess Maduna. Can you see it? Or I can read it. I don't hear the echo again.
Oh, yeah, I can't see it.
Okay, let me go for it, because the echo is gone. Thank you very much, sir. What is the progress from decentralizing COVID-19 PPE supplies from B4SA to National Treasury? For example, we are COVID-19 PPE supplier with stock in the country. We registered and were accepted by the B4SA, but no response to date.
Yeah, I think that is a very, very important question. But I think you need to remember that the transformation is almost like a war. Economic transformation and economic struggle is I think it's the most difficult struggle to engage in, because there are always subtle ways of doing things where you may not necessarily see the plan if you are not part of it. So the fight is still on there. We've raised our issues, and they've worked on including some of our people there, so that in the structures that take those decisions, we're part of that. We've raised our issues with National Treasury, and I'm sure you've seen that National Treasury have decided that they're going to do their own procurement, which is the way it was supposed to have been done in the first place, because the triple PFA, PFMA does not allow National Treasury to outsource their own functions. So National Treasury has ultimately taken back the function, and they are doing their own procurement from there. Hence, I was saying the provision of sanitizers and all those type of things to schools have been advertised by National Treasury.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me see where we are. There we go. Vincent Mukhobo said, what is your approach towards companies that are not BE compliant, such as at level 7, 8, who are comfortable with paying fines than to transform? Companies such as 3, that's Vincent Mukhobo.
Yeah, Vincent, I think the people who designed the BE Act and the codes, what they were trying to do, they were trying to find a way of using the system to actually force people to do things in a certain way. For example, if there's a company that is on level 7, and that company does a business with the company that is level 1, they're going to affect the scorecard of the company that is level 1. So I think that was actually the objective and the plan of the people who designed this, to say it will become a system that then pushes itself for that. So, for example, if a company is level 7, there's no paying of fines, because if you are level 7, what actually punishes you is when you go out on tender. But those companies that are not dependent on tenders, some of them, they decided not to transform, and they remain on level 7. But if they are doing business with other companies that are on a better level, those other companies are the ones who then push them to transform. I've seen it happening where companies decided to cancel contracts with companies that are on level 7, level 8. And that on its own then forces companies to transform. But obviously, there are other people who feel like they should not transform, and I think that's where you need to have a stick from a government point of view, to say we need to ensure that we do a lot of research to understand who is not transforming, who is transforming, and punish those ones who are not transforming. Maybe come up with a way to say those who are not transforming, their license will be suspended or revoked. But that then needs political will, which may or may not be there at some instances.
Okay. Some of the questions go into specifics, but again, sometimes you may just have to be able to get to the general. So let's see how far you can go. This one from Feno. What is BBC doing in order to ensure that the procurement of PPEs benefits the majority of SMEs across the country? A few weeks ago, there was an issue about Imperial, and we have not seen feedback about the matter.
Yeah, as I said, our main role is to lobby and raise issues in the public. We did raise the issue of Imperial. There was subsequently a tender to appoint other companies. I think the tender closes today. So maybe if you're asking that question, it means you haven't seen it. The tender is closing today to try and appoint other people who are going to offer the same service. So as I said, the fight is still on. We're being vigilant in ensuring that no one gets excluded in the process. But it's a battle that I think all of us need to engage in. It can't only be left to the BBC. Individuals who are there who know some information that is what some of the happenings should assist us by sharing that information so that we can then take the battle on.
Yes, this might link then to what Mputi is asking. And if you have covered it, which I think you might have, then we can just move to the next one. But Mputi said, greetings, leadership. Why has BBC not protected members from Bidvest, which is even taking tenders to SMMEs?
Yeah, we're meeting with Bidvest on Monday. That's why I said some of the things we do them behind the scenes.
Okay, maybe then to protect you, then continue behind the scenes on that one now that you've said you are tackling it. Sure.
Yeah, I think what we do, some of the things, when you read them in the papers, you have to first establish the fact. And you can only establish the fact by speaking to the people who are involved. So I think after Monday, we'll have the facts and then we'll see how we deal with the issue. Because sometimes if you are going with the sensations that is in the media, you're going to end up getting involving yourself in things that you don't understand. So it's always important to gather the facts, understand both sides of the story before you come out guns blazing.
Okay. Busi is asking an interesting one. I didn't see this one coming. So BBC once says BBC position on BEE only benefits a few. Do you keep up to date how much revenue is going to same companies repeatedly? Do you monitor monopolization of BEE?
Yeah, it's a very interesting one. I don't know what is the monopolization of BEE because in the country there's no law that says if Sichava has got one tender, then he cannot get another tender. Because also we must run away from a narrative that is created by newspapers that says they are so-called they call them usual suspects. I think that is a very dangerous narrative because we're in a capitalist environment, and that sentiment is not raised when we're talking about other races. It's only raised when we're talking about blacks. We need to understand that we need to create big black businesses. It cannot be correct that we're thinking that black business will always be small and micro and surviving from hand to hand. We need to have a big conglomerate owned by black people because the majority of people in the country are black. Ultimately, the entire economy should reflect the demographics of the country. So we cannot be correct that every time we see someone who's big and black, we want to make them small by calling them usual suspects. So I don't think there's a monopolization of BEE because that for me, would be an incorrect assumption. So that we should not fall into that trap where we believe what we read in the papers. So you need to, when you read stories in the paper, you need to be able to question them and say, but why did they say this when it was a black person, but when it's a white person, they don't say it? For example, when you see a black person driving a Ferrari, chances are what comes into your mind is that either they stole the money or all those type of things. Or we call them black people entrepreneurs because we think they depend on tenders, but we don't call the same white companies that depend on tenders. There are so many white companies that depend on tenders from government specifically, but we don't call them entrepreneurs. We only call black people entrepreneurs. So it can't be the correct way of approaching things.
So there are many comments. We have 5 minutes, so I'll rattle on, and then you'll pick some of the ones that you have not addressed. So I'll start with Nkopan, who says, whose interest does the COVID-19 portal serve? it will seem it only serves the current owners of capital. I had to send several emails for me to be approved, but it is now 3 weeks waiting for technical team to approve my product. I really doubt if this was created to procure from SMMEs. And then Tabiso spoke about, are there any parallels between BBC and BMF? Then there's a question again about Fortune. Talks to about transformation. I'll move on because we have covered that. Paul also says BBC does not advocate for equitable society. Constitutional democracy is not different from neoliberal democracy. So in essence, you want few elevated Negroes at the expense of the masses. So I read it as Paul also writes it. And then there's somebody who's asking how could they participate in the bill? What happened to the billions tenders preneurs made from BE deals? Why are there no visible factories, etc., that have started? The 100 billion industrialist program, what has it achieved? It seems like it produced exactly 100 billionaires, so am I missing something? That's Ulwazi. And then Lebo talks about the Central Energy Fund. In the main, I would like you to cover that. It's quite a big number there, big program and a sentence. I will send it through to you. And then the view on black bands you have made. And then somebody saying they would like the podcast. And yeah, so maybe from what I've just rattled, if you can pick something and try to spend a minute.
Yeah. Thank you very much for the questions, colleagues. I think one thing that I've realized is that we sometimes complain a lot. And sometimes we complain a lot without coming up with solutions. You can just hear it, listen to the radio stations, check some of the WhatsApp groups. We are forever complaining. And when opportunities come to make a difference, we always think that the next person will make a difference on our behalf. And unfortunately, life does not work that way. As the quote by Perich has said, just because you do not take an interest in politics doesn't mean that politics won't take interest in you. So we should be learning from other races. Again, if you look at AfriForum and Solidarity, when they are not happy with something, they go all the way, including going to court. But we don't do that. And then when you look at the Solidarity and especially AfriForum, almost all the Afrikaners who support it, they are contributing money on a monthly basis. Some of them they pay like 10 rands, 50 rands, and all those things, knowing that when they need AfriForum will be there for them with being fully capacitated. They can be able to afford the most expensive lawyers out there. But the same thing is not happening to black organizations. A lot of people don't want to belong to black organizations. They don't want to pay the membership. It's only when they've got problems, when they are facing challenges, then they come running to the same organization that they're not prepared to fund. So I think we need to learn to fund our own struggles, and then also ensure that we contribute to national debates. Every time when there's a law that comes or a bill that comes, let's go there. Let's read it and critique it and make input. I'll give you an example. When there was an amendment.
Maybe before you give an example, because we are right on.
Oh, okay. Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Just indulge Andile quickly, because Andile is quite worried about the funding in terms of the country funding under this context. Just there are so many billions and the funding we are downgraded. In 20 seconds, what's your view? Do you think we're going to be bankrupt as a country?
No, I don't think we'll be bankrupt. Remember, before 1994, the country was actually bankrupt. but we managed to work together as a country to come out of that. So I think in the country we've got the right people. We currently have the right president who needs to be supported. So I don't think we'll be bankrupt. We just need to sort out a few things, including ESCOM, including other SOCs, so that they don't take the country down with us. But I'm very much positive that the country is going to come out of where we are in a better shape. But we have to be there in shaping that. We can't be spectators in our own country. So let's ensure that all the laws that are there, the bills that are there, we contribute by making submissions.
Thank you very much, sir. There were a lot of compliments around how BBC stood with the Minister of Tourism during these difficult times, and people are thanking BBC for that. We are out of time. I would have loved to answer all the questions or post them to our guest speaker, Mr. Kganki Matabane, CEO of Black Business Council. Thank you so much for your input and contribution. One has to appreciate that behind the scenes, there are conversations, but as people said, they want to get an opportunity to make a contribution. And for tonight, bye-bye. I will see you on Monday. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.